Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. The National Youth Development Agency board interviews have raised eyebrows, with some political parties calling for an investigation now into NYDA board candidate Zwelo Masilela's appointment as senior researcher in 2016. It's alleged Masilela was appointed at Mbombela Local Municipality without relevant qualifications. The Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities is set to reconvene next week. This will be on Tuesday, the 11th of March, to announce the top 10 candidates based on the collated scores. Joining us for more on this is independent consultant Sabelo Chalufu. Good evening, Sabelo. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good evening, Fundo.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So as stated in that text there, it has become the subject of debate, at least the performance of some of those candidates. But before we get to the performance of the candidates, let's just talk about the mandate of this agency, which, among others, is to obviously drive the youth agenda. Just talk us through it.
No, thank you very much. So the agency it's got a very important mandate, and it's effectively to drive the youth agenda, youth development in all its various facets. And these include education, these include social issues, social economic development, these include, just every facet about young people. And so it plays an important role. It's sort of like an overarching entity that's supposed to coordinate the work of government in assisting young people to effectively self-actualize. And so it doesn't just deal with what we ordinarily think of when you think about the NYDA, which is about business support of young people. That's important. It is important that young people be supported in that area, but it just goes much further than that.
So a very important but also broad mandate, which some have actually raised concerns about even. That is far too broad. Perhaps it needs to be narrowed down, and perhaps that's why some are not feeling its impact at certain levels because of how broad it is. But then let's talk then, given the important mandate, let's talk about the candidates. If you're going to have a board, we saw it being narrowed down from more than 1,000 that applied.
1,400.
Yes. And then now it was the 19, it will be narrowed down to 10. Just talk to us about what a candidate or what a board member of the NYDA should actually possess.
So there are two levels to this. The first level is what the NYDA Act, as amended, requires, which is that you must be between the ages 18 and 35. You must have academic, or you must be academically qualified or have experience in areas including youth development, finance, law, and the like. And that you must effectively be patriotic. I mean, the Act doesn't include the words patriotic, but the Act specifically says that you must be committed to the development of young people and have a demonstrable record in that regard. And so that is effectively, you could think of it as the minimum standard of what a board candidate of this agency ought to have and ought to be. There's then a further level, which is the level actually that the parliamentary committee responsible for this process, or at least this leg of the process, ought to be looking at, which is that, as the chairperson put it, are you the best amongst the youth? Right? Do you have a record in whatever of these different areas that we've spoken about and that the Act speaks to? In entrepreneurship, in civil activism, in youth activism, in law, in whatever area that's relevant to the agency. So that's the second level. And that level is the important level, actually, because you can be 25, for instance, and have a degree, diploma in whatever area. But if when we look at this 1,400 candidates who applied, we need to be able, South Africans at least, need to be able to look at all these people and say, these 7 candidates who are now the president is appointing, when the process eventually gets to the president, these are the best young people.
They have a demonstrable record of leadership.
They have all of that stuff. They have led, they have been young activists. They have started businesses which have thrived, which have grown. They have, been experienced as young professionals, as engineers, as accountants, as whatever it is. as musicians even, because you don't need, it doesn't need to be just these intellectual sort of spaces. It can also be creative spaces as well, as a young activist in those spaces. So this is the level actually that the committee ought to be focusing on, or at least ought to have paid attention to. Now, in the process, in how they've run the process thus far, at least where I sit as just an independent South African who's observed this whole thing, I look at that and I say, I'm not sure that you've done that. I'm not sure that you've gone and actually looked for the best young South Africans. Yes, you received 1,400.
Given just the 19 that were interviewed, it didn't look as though...
And it's not necessarily about these 19 per se. It's that your process, how you came up with these 19, is concerning to me. When you come as a chairperson of a committee and you inform the committee that, look, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet. And in this spreadsheet, you have 1,400 names. When we next meet to shortlist, I want you to bring your candidates that you are nominating for us to shortlist. Now, yes, you, Mfundo, as a member of the committee, can go and look through that. And you can find Sabelo Chalufu, Bongiwe Zwane, and so on and so on and so on. But when we come back and you then bring those names and numbers to us, which is actually what the chairperson says, bring us the numbers, because each name is a number.
Yes.
Bring us those people. When you then bring those, and all you give us is just the names, the numbers, you don't then tell us what this person has done, what this person has, qualifications, what experience they have. And each of us goes around the table and all we do is provide numbers. That says to me, and when the committee does not apply its mind to who these people are, what background they have, what experience they have, what qualifications they have, the committee, there's no record of the committee applying its mind to that. There's no record at any point of the committee doing that, except for once they were now in the interviewing room and they were being interviewed. This is a problem. Because there's no objective standard, there's no objective metric that you've actually used. You go and you've gone and you've had a weekend and you've come back and you said, yes, 20 people.
But throughout the weekend, they would have researched the specific candidate. So at least it was 1,004. In this instance, then they would have the ones that they prefer and then bring them to the committee. But then now, if you had to say, do away with this process, what process would be more beneficial and ensure that at least the NYDA has a board that is solid and will be able to continue to drive that youth agenda? Because the mandate is quite broad.
So in the opinion piece that I wrote and was published by online by Times Live, the argument that I make is not necessarily that the process must be restarted. I say that the process is concerning and may need to be restarted. There's a risk that it may need to be restarted.
But going forward, what would be the process that perhaps should be applied?
Well, the one thing that the committee can do before it even decides on whether or not to restart the process, one of the things that it can do is to be transparent with us as South Africans. Tell us how it is that each member assessed that 1,400 and determined who they would propose for nomination. They ought to tell us that. We don't know what they have considered. What we know is that the chairperson proposed to the committee and the committee appears to have agreed to going and just selecting names. What we also know is that the chairperson proposed to the committee that if needs be, you may even want to consult your political party. And then they might have a view and you might then, that might then influence your thinking around who to nominate. We need to know that each member of the committee, for example, had a matrix, an objective matrix that considered, for instance, academic experience, as I talk about, academic qualifications rather, professional experience, activist, and each of these clusters, each of these groupings would give you some kind of, let's say, a scoring, system to say if you have a B degree, that's 2 points. If you have a PhD, that's 5 points, whatever it is. If they can tell us that, at least I, on my side, would be a little more comforted. At this point, I'm not, because at this point, what it appears to me is that each member may have gone and gotten a mandate outside of the process. And that mandate may be, to my mind, concerning about how that influences then the process in the committee. So as they consider this, I would propose that they take us into their confidence about these matters and then tell us how they propose if it is possible to rectify at least that component,
Yeah.
how they propose to deal with it. Because at this point right now, what it appears to me, not just what it appears, what I fear is that the committee right now has done a disservice to not only the candidates that were interviewed, but also those who were not interviewed, those who did apply. And most importantly, in actual fact, they have done a disservice to the millions of young South Africans out there who deserve an entity that is serious about what it does, that is serious about them, and they actually deserve a parliamentary committee and a government that takes them seriously to present the best young people to them who can help drive their agenda forward.
Let's see what happens on Tuesday, because at least now we know that come Tuesday they would have collated the scores and they'll unveil at least the 10. And then from there, if perhaps from just the concerns having been raised in the public space, maybe they might want to relook and open the process yet again. But Sabelo, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That is Sabelo Chalufu. He's an independent consultant. They're just talking to us about the NYDA interview processes that have become quite the subject of debate.